feels like Sensei's here. It wasn't the Aikido, it was like, you know, better there. It's just that was the feeling of it. That when Sensei was alive, there was this pull. He pulled people towards getting along. But then all of a sudden, he's not there. And then she said, "You'd be surprised, Jack. Racist, sexist, business." And okay. So, you know, I tend to be a certain way because, you know, Hikitsuchi Sensei was a horrible business guy. Okay. It's just, you know, it was not anything that he focused on, right? But one thing that, you know, you got from him was that pull. And everybody experiences that very individually. I'm going to move the other way because there's some stuff there. So let's think we go here. We go here. We go spotlight video. And what do we do? We go like this. And we get our camera angle a little better. Okay. And so, who's standing here? The movement's really good. I get very, very busy moving. Right about here, kind of lining up to yourself, kind of squaring away. Like I'm still conscious of the noise in the background. But so as you find yourself on increasing levels, you start to find the sacred through that. And there can be a lot of activity out there, you know? And you could be like Jean-Luc Picard. I represent Starfleet. But in that last show, Starfleet has fallen about several levels in terms of things. It's become like a whatever. And so it's like, So if your light was out there to find you, you might wind up in a vineyard waiting to die. But something, the universe, the sacred will call you. And so getting that feeling, like for me, it's more that feeling of wonder. It's that feeling of awe. My imagination is brought into play. For example, we're doing a movement. That's the expanding part of it, but there also is the fact where it draws in to itself. Expansion, contraction. Now, even though there is a movement up and out, down and back and in, the core of it is kind of still, so there's movement and stillness. And that's kind of like a center. One thing when Sensei is talking about the one, a lot of it is about understanding the center. And, you know, this motion can go out or reverse. Sphere size, and the sphere itself can rotate, but there is that one. So unification, returning to the one, division. creation, different angles. And as this vast comes back to the one, there's a feeling of contraction, extension. So you get, let's say, so coming in is kind of what you call that sort of tension. Release. So those are Osensei's Hachiriki, great power. And you're just doing this motion. And I could be here kind of going, okay, I'm Jean-Luc Picard in his vineyard, just doing all the right things for my age, and I'm just waiting to die. He calls Starfleet and says, I need a ship. And Starfleet says, no. Well, Jean-Luc Picard wants a ship, he gets a ship. That's that pull. So if I check the body, we did that as an exercise. Body feels looser, freer, but more grounded. If I do an emotional check, and you're following that pull, feel alive. Everything is not an obstacle, but it's a challenge. Therefore, you have energy. You can feel maybe more depth. So there I am waving my arms around, but I mean, the feeling, if you're on the Enterprise, you look out, you see space. You're in space, you don't just see it out there on the prompter. Space is all around. You can travel through that space. And you can hyperdrive through that space. Space. And when I'm here, I kind of feel more transparent. Therefore, all that out there, all this in here, that's where the sacred and the sacred in you start to commune. Now, a lot of things, for example, we have movements like boom, 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 boom. What's inside you is reaching out. What's outside is reaching back. Boom, 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 boom. How long do you do it? As long as you do it. If you make it an endurance run, or conversely, you do it too hyper, you're gonna boom. That which is in you reaches out, that which is out there reaches back. This is a conversation, a communion. Boom. So you do it as long as you do it. Okay? Oh. All that's out there, but all that's out there is in you. Now the tummy starts to kind of shake. I'm shaking, my tummy's shaking. But on a more transparent level, there's a vibration in your tummy, and that vibration is moving your hands. I'm not going to last too long. And that which is shaking your tummy is kind of, there's a vibration out there. And then those two vibrations, they start to commune, talk. Oh. You could do this for an hour, or you could do this for 10 seconds. Okay? If I check here. You feel the weight of the body a little bit more after that. So it's not, the thing is not just an idea. But it's not just the weight of the body. There's substance to what's out there. And yet that substance is alive. It has a vibration. And so that sacredness has many different levels of experience, one of which is you are not just a physical body, you're an energy body. That energy body is kind of an inner song to it. And then the universe itself has a song. In fact, universe. Deepak Chopra defined universe as the one song. Okay. So we come out of that song, we find our own song. We realize the universe is the song. And even though we're very individual, that song out there starts to kind of, we tune our own song, keeping our individuality with that song. Then if I check here, my faculties are a lot sharper. Balance, the actual focus is very expansive, but in terms of details. I can handle details and yet also realize I'm part of a larger whole, but that larger whole is also inside. So there's a kind of that feeling of the echo or clapping motion. It can just be a ritual, but or here, this can be kind of seen as a prayer. But one thing that is, everybody is a center. There, well, I'm not saying anything, but that there's kind of a quiet to that center. And around that quiet, the actual situation or the world around that center comes into focus. And we can start to do movement. We're a part of that world of motion, and yet there's a balance that the stillness inside allows us to, right? It's almost like We can take various Aikido movements. Part of these different energy currents. And yet your alignment is too out there. Checking your own body. There's a nice flexible base. Core and hips. Engage in not a rigid form. Adaptable. Free. When I'm confused out there, there's no freedom in confusion. But as it kind of settle a little bit, gets this place a little bit, the movements organize themselves. That pull, but it can talk to what's inside you. Organizes the movement. I have a center. The center is an adaptable center. It also is very, very calm and deep. Now I'm beginning to feel the body a bit. And I could just be doing the body as I'm exercising. The body if everything out there is sacred, you went to body, that which is out there, but really body comes out of the material, that sacredness. And the body is also organized off of a design that the sacred as an intelligence of mind laid out. Since they said things like the universe is inside us. Okay, so everything out there came into being off of a grand design that was filled in by energies. So as we're moving and moving and moving and moving and moving, right? We are, in our own way, putting our movement based upon that grand design. Mind, the design. Body, that design in motion. Okay? So today in the meeting, with ritual. More important than the actual form of the ritual is that, for example, if you're teaching it, you have that particular sense of the sacred. If you don't like the word sacred, essence. Or since they use fancy words like it's love. It's different than reaching out that way and extending that. Extending. Handling a situation thus I'm in conflict with it, then bringing an increasing sense, reach out from love. And if you love, you'll protect. If you love yourself, you'll protect yourself and move. Sometimes there's a sidestep. Sometimes, when things are coming at you, you move in a way that you can turn, connect, and all of a sudden you have a direction with it. And after a while, as opposed to let it wait till it explodes, you move in and redirect it. So people, my real fear is all of a sudden, I like to move. But yeah, of course, we all like to move, we're alive. But what is the purpose of that motion? This Jean-Luc Picard, I'm in my being earth, I'm waiting to die. Did he go into outer space to die? No, he went to outer space following that pull. And I won't tell you the end of it. It's only about 8 episodes, and you have to watch it on CBS All Access. So, and if you do it to that, then Star Trek Discovery is good. So, you know, we're still on All Access, even though our free trial period ended. We went on it just to see the Picard series. But even there, something about that, something pulls you. Something pulls you. Something pulls you. You're having dreams. And they're strange dreams. Or certain things you notice are kind of different, right? You know, one thing over the last year, not for anything important, but you have to kind of register for something. What do you have to do? You have to create a password. All right? You have to create a password. So over the last year, not for my important stuff, but I've been kind of putting all this stuff around Dame Diana Rigg and the passwords. I don't know why. It's just every password I create for, this or that, nothing important, has had something of her in it. And then, of course, what happens one day, I think it was Wednesday of last week, first thing I do is I open my iPad, and they show little news blurbs. The first thing right on there is that Dame Diana Rigg died. And she had been battling cancer since she was discovered in March. I didn't know any of that. But something about that is kind of registering. So all these crazy passwords you have to create to do this or that or this to that. A lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them had her or some aspect of her in it. So I was picking something up. So you'd be surprised. There's an affinity for, an appreciation for, a wonderment for. Therefore, action comes out of that. You're pulled. You're pulled. Well, since he was following the pull of his path towards coming, therefore, at a certain point, coming, that we're pulling him because of the actual coming inside of him, that we're communing and talking to the coming outside. And so my fear, I like to move, Sensei, let's move some more. That's good. But the movement pulls you. You have purpose. You also are coming from a loving, deeper place. Something's coming at you. You may reach out, boom, but you're reaching out with love. And love has many different aspects. It can be very inclusive, or boom, it can be very penetrating. And so, my fear, I'm kind of like Ron Adams, that warrior coach. What was he? Everybody else is high-fiving and celebrating a 50 to 30-point victory on the road, and he's scowling. Katie, you missed that rotation. Come on, didn't you see Steph cutting to the hoop on that one possession? See, he is sort of following that pull towards perfection, okay? And of course, the rest of the team, wow, that's important, right? Strength in numbers. The team out there, the team inside. Team inside, your own aspects, resonate with, commune out there with the outer team, right? The player here has a quartet or ensemble, but that ensemble is in here, meeting with the ensemble out there, and the soloist in here is feeding the members of the ensemble. Then you have your Chet Bakers and your Miles Davises and your Charlie Parkers and all those greats. And that's what pulls you. And so if there's anything that, you know, I could kind of try to take, you know, just say whatever, just, there's a feel for that. That feel for that. And as a teacher, that's not something you can teach anybody. But checking to see if it's awake in you, you can awaken that in other people. That's what a teacher is supposed to do. Not teach technique or movement. They're supposed to awaken that. Keep it awake here and awaken it out there. That's the purpose of a teacher. Teacher is never truth, but the teacher is a finger pointing the way to. Okay, that's basic Bruce Lee. You're never that, although you are, because you are in communion with it. And being in communion with it, you start to realize that it's in you. But the second you say, I am that, that's what's called I. So you have a relationship with it, both the interior of yourself and that thing out there, and you follow its pull. And it may make no logical sense, okay? One thing I always respected about O-Sensei was he was a horrible businessman. The sense says, he started a business when he was younger, and it was never went well. He turned it over to somebody else, kapow! Even Aikido, right? He was this otherworldly talent. He produced some really good talent out there, not like him. Okay? He dies. Aikido blossoms. Why? Because the son, well, I really liked what he did, I also liked him. And the grandson, likewise. Washiba family is real class. Okay? But they followed the business model. Therefore, they were successful. Since they planted the seed, it grew. Now it's kind of going this way. Why? Because that which was the essence of that seed sprouting is wilted. So our responsibility as teachers, well, Sensei's not here anymore, but those forces that intelligent universe itself has this or that, still has this pull. And that pull out there is to awaken inside of us that which is pulling us, to where that which is pulling us and that which is inside of us start to commune, start to talk. So you have your form. Whether you clap or whether you do this, right? You're being pulled towards what's out there, but then again, boom, you bring it inside, boom, or you awaken whether that's inside you, boom, 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 boom. How long do you do this? As long as you do it. But again, I'm thinking about it. I'm trying to figure it out. I'm not doing it. Boom, 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 boom. Or that which is vibrating inside starts to notice that which is vibrating outside. It's a field around you. Your body is an energy body within an energy field. For a sensei, that energy field was the universe. And that vibrating part inside him was kind of his soul. Boom. Let's talk better and 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 better. Consequence. My body feels lighter but freer. I can be here or I can be in motion. Boom. I can stay or I can move. When I'm moving, I can move in waves or pyramid spirals or kind of drop into a deep, dark cave where things are very, very calm and still. Or find a magic pool in that cave. Just kind of soak. And as I'm soaking in that pool, I'm kind of in another world. I'm kind of finding the magic jewels there in that pool. And they have essences that can kind of fill not my physical body, but more my soul body. And check my posture is straight. Check my attention is very expansive, but I can hone in on a detail in a very flexible detail, and still remain connected to the whole. Unification, the whole division, boom, boom. Movement, stillness, expansion, contraction. Tension, release. Sensei's 8 powers. Okay? Anyway, what we did right there was just kind of go through, not ritual. For example, I can go into, how to do this, how to do that. But what the attempt was to try and pass on kind of that, for that word, the sacredness of it. Okay? So that is something. See, anything can be sacred. You make anything sacred. Okay? I'm sure picking up his horn was sacred to Miles Davis. Okay? I'm sure going into a gym and holding a basketball and dribbling it was sacred, or is sacred, to Stephen Curry. All right? I'm sure picking up his glove and running out to center field was sacred to Willie Mays. And when you are in that sacredness, you discover what a lot of people call joy. There's a joy to being there. And the joy is not an idea, but it kind of permeates. Boom. When you are fused with that joy, the world might be rotten out there, but you know who you are. And you know what you need to do with that world. And you also know what you don't let the world do to you. And so, this part of Sensei's message. It's more my interpretation of it. But that part of it is very important. Okay? Bruce Lee put it well. He said, I'm not really here to teach you anything. I just want you to explore you. I can only teach you to explore yourself. If you start looking at me to learn something, you're looking at the finger, you miss the moon. You're the moon. I'm the finger. But I'm going to try to be as good an indicator of a direction. This is my direction. You got to find yours. So that's a challenge when you are teaching. Okay? Almost anything. Now, what we're going to do here, we're going to let me, yeah. We've been working on this lately. Okay? So, Boken, you can use a Joe for this. Just make sure if you're swinging a Joe, it's longer. You don't want to put a hole in your ceiling or break a lamp.
They're still having class.
I'm sorry, what? Yeah, so just make sure, when we start to do the movement with the weapons, okay? Now, one of the things about the sword is like I'm doing, I'm swinging the sword. You do check your basics. Like for me, very important, the grip. See, when I'm this way, I can't execute the closing motion. So I hold in a diagonal grip with the little ring finger and the thumb, and the palm is a part of that grip. Too loose, too tense, and both hands. Okay? And I don't go this way or hold here, but the end of the sword, the handle, and my own hand blade. In fact, if I hold this way, see, I'm forming a hand blade. And then in this particular position, I'm forming a triangle. Front foot point, left foot base, right hand leads before it's right foot for most swords. We do go the other side, but your basic cutting, you kind of do this way. Okay? And you're raising to some degree. You can raise very shallow, but when you raise shallow, see the third eye point, you don't want to be covering your face. Right? More of a medium raise, extreme raise. You're actually putting the sword into your tailbone. And the cut can be generally level with yourself, your head. Show men. Boom. And cut to the waist. Sometimes, for example, here, the warm-up. You see right here when I'm just using the arms, it ends. So I have to adjust the body. Here I'm an old tree. It's like Jean-Luc Picard waiting to die in his vineyard. This is Jean-Luc Picard going into outer space to fight for something that's pulling him. And so that's a warm-up motion. But when I'm in a cutting position, point, base. Okay? When you take a step, and a step, or a step, a step, a step, you're forming a triangle. And so, too long, too high and forward, natural. Ankles, knees, hips, loose, but not sloppy. Right? Now, raise, boom, boom, boom. at the very end of the cut. The end of a cut, boom. The hands form a double spiral. Okay. Now, all that's infinite. You learn all those details. You never stop learning the details. But we're going to examine, let me check the time since I forgot the clock. We are okay. We're going to take a flashlight. I'm going to turn it on. And I'm going to go like that. And I'm going to go like that. And then I'm going to try to make that faster. But guess what? Boom, the beam is going back. Boom, the beam is going forward. Beam is going back, beam is going forward. Beam is going back, beam is going forward. Back and forward. Okay. Kojima Sensei said this once. He said, you know, the speed of a sword is not in the hand. It's in your mind. And I can move the hands really fast, but if I got a flashlight here, I go like this, I shoot it into my face. I go this way. All of a sudden, that beam is touching that wall, isn't it? Then I can sweep it this way, or I can just angle it forward. The beam goes much faster, right? And so what I'm doing is I'm beginning to organize the movement, not just trying to do this motion harder and faster, but boom, boom. Beam of light, beam of light. Boom. Or I can do this motion faster and harder. Well, beam of light, beam of light. Beam of light, beam of light. Beam of light, beam of light. And the best thing to do is you find, without even thinking, when you're forming the beam of light here, the cut itself pulls the hands into that position. I'm closing. Boom, there's closure. Boom, move like a beam of light. Or cut like a beam of light. Boom, 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 boom. Okay. So again, as Kojima Sensei put it, the speed in the sword is not in your hands at all. And the sense of mind, what Sensei said, move like a beam of light. 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 I'm thinking about moving like a beam of light, or trying to move faster to move like a beam of light. It's different than move like a beam of light. A lot of Sensei's words like that are kototama. The actual words have an energetic aliveness to them, which when we start to appreciate his teachings as kototama, our own structure, mentally, physically, spiritually, organized and put us at different levels of ourselves. Okay? Move like a beam of light. 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 Light moves fast. Goes back and forward like that. And my hand's moving faster, not quite that. Move like a beam of light. Move. As I go back, see, I've just cut. As I move back, if the hands are free and relaxed, they go back to this position where the V here is right in the middle, and the V here is right here. Okay, it's here, but it's not raised. Move like a beam of light. That's natural movement. Natural movement. Now, boom. And as that beam of light goes out, there's a natural closing. Okay? So if we follow the kototama, the technical details tend to come into focus. And you have to learn the details, but a lot of times after a while, the details get in the way of finding the natural movement when the body follows the kototama. And that's part of training, is you learn to trust. In other words, you're establishing this communion between the sacred out there and the sacred of yourself. You learn to trust that. Okay? Boom, boom. Boom, boom. Okay. We put this down. Move like a beam of light. 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 Boom. If I'm wondering how to move like a beam of light, I'm in the idea of it, looking for it out there. Classic mind-body separation. Move like a beam of light. Move like a beam of light. I got it. Yeah, it's up here, but move like a beam of light is both, if you're touching your soul, mind and body, and to follow each other and reinforce each other. You can do this forever. Now you can do this, kind of feel something, but move like a beam of light. 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 That's kototama. And as you start to get more in touch with the communion of the sacred inside you and the sacred out there, what happens is you appreciate the kototama. You let the kototama guide you. So, you can swing the sword forever. Okay? Or you can do the ritual forever. But if you don't touch the sacred in you, or the essence of what's there in you, and let that commune with the essence out there, anything, practice, ritual becomes form. But when we do that, in fact, really what's out there, it pulls us. It pulls us. Now, if you get somewhere, boom, move like a beam of light for the thing. Move like a beam of light for the thing.
He mostly kind of sits back and nods his head when somebody.
Yeah. Move like a beam of light. Move like a beam of light.
Say anything if he doesn't agree with it. And sometimes he won't even nod.
Fly like lightning.
That's what we should do.
Fly like lightning. Fly like lightning.
As a leader,
Fly like lightning.
taking a very interesting leadership style. Chen is a project manager in profession and in personality.
So there's that feeling when I'm getting solid to hit. Fly like lightning. Fly like lightning. You have an easy sense around. Boom. So really, too heavy.
Okay, I think somebody needs.
Or I may do something on a bowl in a china shop. Fly like lightning. Fly like lightning. Fly like lightning.
Well,
Fly like lightning.
the group I've got working, we're working
and gently. Body loose, free, not sloppy,
I think
also not too rigid.
we need to keep a certain separation.
Attention, very expansive, but you can handle detail.
Multi-part
Boom.
schools also.
So what's happening is I'm getting, ideally, good training, Martin tests where the much deeper, more original, but also more efficient level in here. Okay, so the path of Aikido is also another way. It's called Shugyo, it's inner development. Okay?
Excuse me, I think someone needs to mute their microphone.
Yes. So the people who are operating the building happen to be
Now,
dojo community members.
we've had move like a beam of light, strike like
Not
lightning,
necessarily the people who are running the school.
fly like lightning, fly like lightning,
And
fly
I
like
think that's a good
fly
separation.
like.
Because
And now we have that
who have
spike.
skills in running
Boom,
the commercial real estate business.
boom. This is Kojima Sensei's cut.
Or
Boom,
want to be
boom,
running.
boom.
The people who are running the school should be focused on running the school.
It's just,
And not dealing with
do you have enough different people involved? Dojo to have like 3 sets of people.
I've got 2 sets of people. I've got real estate people and who I'm talking to this morning who are running the dojo people. And I am crossing over through them because I'm involved in supporting both of those efforts, and I've got roles that I'm playing with them. Right now, I'm trying to help keep the dojo as a community connected and doing things. He has taken classes and he's starting classes.
Yeah,
It's not that he can't do it. It's, I know there have been times when he
that's also a wrist motion.
Or it's okay if he doesn't figure it out. You know,
It's not like you even had to drive there.
no, it's okay if one of the class sessions fails to be recorded or something. It's okay.
So you see that a lot of the ritual connected to now we were kind of demonstrating this motion. Yeah, I'm doing one-handed, but and Osensei's, you know, that particular thing, move like a beam of light, fly like lightning, strike like thunder, move in circles around the stable center. So all throughout, the center must be stable, but a stable center is not a set center. So when somebody says, I like to move, that's good, I do too. But movement out there, motion, motion, moving in circles around that stable center. Okay? Some movements like that, movements like that, movements like that. Boom, fly like beam of light, fly like lightning, strike like thunder. Okay, that's what they call these days, it's called cross training. You can strike like thunder for a half hour, all right, but you may someday need to fly like lightning or move like a beam of light. So I break it up. Okay, that way, you know, you get too strong at one thing, and you think that's the answer, and you're not flexible. Okay, so we take the staff, and again, I'm utilizing a shorter one because inside I can be freer. Like I say, I have boom, boom. That means, okay, that's if I had a longer staff, I'd have my movement be more restrictive. Boom. And now for here, move in circles around the stable center. Move in circles around the stable center. Move. Now, for example, that's a circle. That circle can also go to that circle. And that circle can also go to that circle. And that circle can go to that circle, that circle, that circle, that circle. All of that is coming out of the stable center, which is not a set center, which means my focus can be very expansive, and yet, boom, I can handle as little pocket of details as I need to. Boom, 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 boom. So that's training too. You don't have a training partner right now, but you can be training. Much of this stuff I think Sensei got because he didn't rely on the dojo. He taught classes. Was he training? Yeah, but he was teaching. Where was his training? His training was with the sword, spear, fan, whatever it was. Sometimes in nature. But they allowed him. Boom, 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 boom. Boom, 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 boom. That which is inside you, that which is out, starting to commune, creates the movements, the takemusu. Boom, 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 boom. Boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, boom. Oh. Feeling for me, I'm kind of suspended and hungry. Boom, 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 boom. There's a wonder and beauty to creation, the universe. And as you get that communion going, boom, 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 you are partaking of that. And the interior sense for you is wonder, is openness. And when I'm in wonder, I'm much more connected to things that I love. Therefore, there's more love that I'm able to appreciate and extend. Okay? So those are things that are very important. So things like movement, they're good. But movement around a stable center. Well, Sensei's word for that is takemusu. Boom, 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 boom. Boom, 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 boom. And that, if you're teaching class, a lot of times is too much for the students. But as a teacher, that has to be awake in you. And whether you teach that consciously out there, that is permeating you. And therefore, through that, it's touching those people. So it's giving them the rudiments to find it. Okay? And so when people want to move, good. But movement around a stable center. Circles forming around a stable center. 1, 2, 3. That is 3 circles. That circle, that circle, that circle. That circle, that circle, that circle. Stable center is not a fixed center. A stable center allows you to shift from circle track to circle track to circle track. It allows somebody like Chet Baker to play a whole riff along a series of chords. So what happens is that you are,
Or haven't even shown up.
through that communion, you are creating.
They haven't even come once. There was a half a dozen people who came to new
And
classes.
for example, whatever reason, the noise in the background hasn't stopped. Okay.
One of them.
You can pay attention
More than one.
to what's a distraction,
Two of them have come.
or you can stay focused. So a lot of times misfortune,
There was, like I said,
that which is bad,
people who would come to new classes.
that which corrupts,
All there every day. But out of those 6 people,
Every Aikido is staying on track through that. If Sensei had allowed the war and everything that he stood for, he's a martial artist. He taught military, he taught police. He had connections all through the government. And all that went totally crazy in World War II. Totally crazy. And that could have disillusioned him, it could have made him bitter. He could have gone out to Iwama and been Jean-Luc Picard in his vineyard waiting to die.
I see everybody who joins.
Instead, that which became the Aikido, the post-war Aikido, was more awakened in him. Yeah, horrible circumstances for development, but guess what? He won over himself. He won over the circumstances. So when things are disruptive or whatever it is, yeah, there's a human level where we got to say that. But sometimes there's a message waiting for you, but you can't hear it because you're following social, political etiquette. And so sometimes you got to say, okay, I'm going to stay tuned to that. And everybody has to do that in the wrong way. And that takes courage. It takes courage to do that. It takes courage in a lot of ways to tune out what everybody else sometimes is in love with and follow you. Be you. Okay? That takes courage, which is one of the other attributes. You don't get the courage from being tough. You get the courage from finding that in you, which you see out there, bring it in, letting it talk. And then that becomes your motivating factor for teaching. You're doing just about anything. Yeah, we exist in a world of people. But since I said this, the whole world's not going well because people hang out with people saying and doing things which are boom, boom, people things. All right? But I said, who do I commune with? Well, it's translated as, I commune with God. But that was a generalization. What he kind of meant, he communed with Kami. Communed with the divine essences and energies of creation, sacredness of the universe. Measuring himself, by communing with it, finding it in himself. And therefore, as he got more in tune with what was there and what was inside him, it was translated as I commune with God, or I talk to God. Of course, he hung out with people. We're not going to escape people or their stupidity. And stupidity is not a judgment, it's just a discernment. Okay, so Aikido's message ultimately leads us to having that courage, having that strength. Again, it's like Jean-Luc Picard. I'm almost 80 years old, I'm going to go into outer space. That's why it's a great show. All right. And so I won't tell you how it ends. It has a couple of wrinkles in it, but that's also a sensei. So when he says, engage, what's he talking about? I'm going to be as pure and an empty a vessel to engage the universe in its harmony and to bring it into being here. And I form a relationship with it because one of my jobs here is to protect that essence or that sacredness in this crazy world. Okay, so you're kind of like oh, I don't know, using the popular culture terms, you're kind of like Captain Marvel. You have all these powers, but you protect. You protect not just the earth, you protect the universe, okay? And that's pretty big. So the best thing we can do is start to establish that interior relationship, realize that it extends out, or conversely the opposite. It's hard sometimes to look at the petty politicians and see the sacred in them. But there's discernment, which means, yeah, that's destructive. That breeds hatred and division. And yeah, somewhere in there is a sacred being that really is dead. Now, do I want to be like that? I can be like that if I resist and am in opposition to the exterior behavior of. And it's somewhat infuriating and punishing to some degree to say, yeah, there is sacredness in that person. And what a shame. And that keeps you honest. It's hard to extend love to certain things and people. But everything out there comes out as something that's sacred. And I'm sure Sensei woke up every day during World War II thinking about the government and the decisions in the war, and instead of condemning them or escaping, he was able to discern his path, which is not the path of war, not the path of national supremacy, but the path of individuation and peace and love. So when the war ended, he had something. And it wasn't, he was so good, other people formed around him a foundation for Aikido Open post-war. First martial art, we, the occupation, allowed to open. And he wasn't out there kind of, unfortunately, teaching at that time, but he was out there making appearances, trying to awaken this in people. So anyway, I think that's about it for today. So those of you who would like to stay, we usually go in the other room and do a kind of a chat. So I'm going to end this part, okay? Those of you who would like to, for some of us, we did another meeting before this, the meeting before the class. So if you feel like staying, feel free. If you don't, this is all just very optional, okay? So. So, anyway, we're, anybody with a question on, and there's a lot of stuff right there. But what happened today is we had a meeting for the meeting, and I kind of got cut off when I was trying to at least put some of it. So, sometimes things just want to come out, okay? And a lot of what's out there in Aikido is very good. But a lot of questions these days as to why Aikido has kind of gone through a decline. Well, my sense a little bit, we're not being pulled if we're not pulling things and people in. See, Nado Sensei kind of puts it this way. A lot of times these forces, if you are ignoring them, they push. We're learning a whole bunch of things. The whole planet has ignored climate change. And now, okay, you're getting flooding on the East Coast and fires burning up the West Coast. That's fire and water. That's basic creation. Now, fire and water are supposed to work for us. But we've been so out of touch with our environment, with nature, we have not treated nature in a sacred way. So it's not that nature is punishing us. It is just simply that the balance between ourselves, we treat ourselves the way we treat nature. And the answer is yes, we do. We flood our consciousness with a lot of crazy, meaningless stuff. We exist in a lot of ways very much away from. And so, yeah, nature is saying, okay, there's something called a pandemic here, and there's climate change. There are other things, fortunately. So, the lesson is, how are we treating ourselves? And that becomes very important. You can't treat the world out there any better until we, I'm in that collective, start to treat ourselves better. And one of the things that is difficult, we want to reach out with criticism. Reach out with love. There's a difference between criticism and discernment. Part of the development in the training, the shugyo, whatever you want to call it, because we are educating ourselves, in creation, on a journey back to a truer level of self. And one of the swords, the only sword we're developing in Aikido, the only sword that is worth wielding is discernment. Because we must make choices. No discernment, no choices. No choices, things keep on going the way they are. So, it is that which created the imbalance tends to feed itself until we say, okay. And then, if we must look at things, the actual sacred has a path back to itself, which we can feel the pull of. And right now we're feeling the push of being out of tune with it, both ourselves and also the actual environment, nature, the world, the universe. And so, that's a kind of a big path. So Sensei, when he really was talking about Aikido, Hikizuchi Sensei used to always say, Shingu de keiko yaru to, sekai no tame ni keiko shiteru. Which translates, I use the Japanese because I still remember the words. I still remember the words because they're burned into my soul. All right. And that, and his thing is very local. But he believed in what he was doing, what he was teaching, possibly to exclusion of what other people taught. That's natural and human. But his message was, when you're training for the whole world. You're developing your own persona, because we all are a person here, to fit the original design of you, to be able to recognize that if we protect the sacred out there, because you understand, and protect the sacred in here. And that's it. If there's any lesson that Aikido kind of needs to learn, is that. The world is totally out of balance because everybody's into this faction or that faction. And to actually kind of, as I said, it's really painful to look at somebody in a position of power who totally breeds hatred and separation for his own ego and say, there's a divine being there. And then the discernment is basically dead. And the feelings that come up there are sometimes hollowness, anger. And I'm not capable of this myself. I am not capable of it myself. To reach out with love. That does not mean I'm going to vote for that person. Absolutely not. But instead of hating, instead of judging, I can discern what that particular universal soul being is doing with his soul power at this age. And it's a battle. Not to fight, not to hate, not to judge, but to discern. Second, we start to judge or hate, we're not part of our soul essence anymore. So he wins. And that's a very difficult place. And there, it's like being in a sword fight for your life, because you are. Your soul doesn't ever die, but it can get so covered with a massive ego and ego agenda that the actual essence of the soul is practically dead. And so, to discern, not judge, to stay awake, and be very conscious of that area in us that wants to hate, wants to judge, wants to make somebody wrong. And there's a difference between discernment and judgment. And that right there, what would those senseis say about what's going on? He would probably cry. And it would probably be, even for him, a very difficult thing to not hate or judge. He said, don't call things good or evil. He said, because basically whether something's good or evil is working for the completion of the universe. And in some sense, when something's bad, if there's any sort of discernment alive in people, discernment is of the soul. It's not of the ego. Then maybe things get woken up. Maybe things awaken. Because things are so bad and so corrupt, people start to see and empower their soul's discernment. And so something incredibly bad can actually lead to something that hopefully is more along a correct path. And if we're frozen in judgment, we're participating in a lot of ways in the polarization that people like Mr. Trump are trying to actually perpetuate. It keeps them on top. And that's the interior sword fight. It's a fight for our soul. Because I wanna judge, I wanna hate just like everybody else. And most of the time, I do. But I'm just saying that there's a deeper sense of me that does know when I do that, he wins. And the people like him win. So, the Aikido path is a very rich one, it's very full, but it also is a very difficult one. Think of what it was like for O Sensei, who was so awakened to face the war. And yeah, he could have just lived on that farm and just said, I'm done. The world's hopeless, but he didn't. He laid some seeds, which are still potentially there. There's a difference between seeds that are dead and seeds that are dormant. My sense is the Aikido is the dormant period. Okay? But that which, of course, dormancy means there's life force, it's just dormant. It can be awakened. And so, what we're trying to do by just going into certain things that, come up with a lesson plan for the dojo is that we are assuming that this is a period of dormancy. A lot of things just close down for the winter. Spring comes. They're dormant. They don't die. There's death. I don't think Aikido is dead, but it's dormant. So what do you gather? What do you gather for the dormancy? What do you gather, in that interior sense of yourself as the sacred? And sometimes that just has to kind of incubate. Last night, I think I was listening to the Do show, and one of the people on there mentioned an incubator. And it kind of got shot down. And no, an incubation period is like a dormancy. And I think the whole push last night was on trade-in, which means it's right now, do it. That's also true too. But no matter how good O-sensei was, he was not going to stop the war. He was not going to change the minds of the generals and the politicians that were using the emperor's status of descending from the sun goddess to stop the war. Instead, he worked on that communion, really defining what was sacred in him, seeing that in everything, in everyone, even the people that potentially we can hate, and the things and the institutions we can hate. And that is what you would call the real live blade training, which, to be honest with you, I fail at. But I know that's important. I just fail. Okay? But we can work at not just the realization of it, but the actualization of ourselves as somebody who protects the sacred because they have a sense of that sacred in them. And then the sacred pulls us. If you're going to be a political activist, you're going to feel the pull towards something. And when you feel that pull, you won't be beaten down by the government or stupidity. That's your pull. For whatever reason, 1973, I get out of grad school. I'm going to go train in Japan. I don't know why. It was an insane thing to do. I make almost no money. I've been paid by the dojo since February or so. Everything is imploding. I don't get a check from state because the activity classes didn't go, right? So that part of it is tricky. But for me, there's still that pull. And this whole crisis, and actually several crises, hadn't happened, I would have been Jean-Luc Picard on his vineyard waiting to die. That part of us is very, very easy to get into. So the Aikido part of it, Mary Honey Sensei says this all the time, it's about a very, very deep introspection and ability to see ourselves. See, in other words, to really see through to the sacred in us, we also have to understand the parts of us that block it. That's part of the Shugyo. Now, if we were to kind of say this, because we were having a meeting about instructors and everything, is this stuff that you should probably try to teach the students? Well, you represent it. You protect it. You try to awaken it in your own unique way to those you're teaching. Therefore, when you're in that, you are in a sensei's lineage. And to be in his lineage, you don't need to be Japanese and of a certain rank and got trained at this school or that school. I don't think he meant that. But if you feel that pull towards him, for some reason, you don't have to understand it. You understand what the sacred is. The next step is you find what is sacred in you or me. And the last step is very hard. It's understanding everything is sacred, no matter how seemingly corrupt it is, how disorganized or how hateful it is. Okay? I thought, Mother Teresa said something very interesting, about her own spiritual practice. And her statement was something like, every day I get to see Christ in all his infuriating incarnations. Every day I get to see Christ in all his infuriating incarnations. And it's hard to continue to reach out with love and service. But I thought that was about as good a definition of love that Sensei talks about as anything. And that, I'll tell you, is hard. I struggle with that every second of the day. But that's to go boldly where almost nobody goes. Right? And one thing you find out about the Picard thing is he falls out of grace from Starfleet because he champions causes that are unpopular. Because he's following a moral compass, not what's best politically for Starfleet. The second Starfleet realizes that he's out of Starfleet. Just because something has a tag on it doesn't make it right. It has to fit here. That part of it, along with being able to handle Christ and all his infuriating or her infuriating incarnations, is actually pretty important. Anyway, I'm going to call it for today. My battery's letting me know it's just about run out. So that's a sign. So I'm going to thank everybody for tuning in. Okay. Okay, the battery. Okay, take care.